Pat Davis, welcome back to New Mexico in Focus.
Thanks, Jeff.
We'll get to Mayor Keller's proposal to remove the Civilian Police Oversight Agency and the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board from under the City Council in a moment. Those are some seriously clunky proper nouns.
Yeah.
I would like to begin, however, by asking sort of a bigger question. Why is citizen police oversight important, especially for a department like APD?
Well, remember that at the end of the day, sort of that policing function is kind of the most important and maybe the biggest extension of the government's power over people, right? We have the ability to take away a person's life if we determine, that police officer determines at that moment that they've committed something that is danger to other people, right? There's no second chance on that decision. And quite frankly, departments like APDs have had a really bad history for a really long time of ignoring the constitutional requirements to be sure that we're getting ahead of that, we're intervening, we're thinking about use of force in a way that makes it the last resort, not the first. And so it's no history. APD has not done this well, not under this mayor, not under the last 3 or 4 mayors, not under a number of police union members. Its culture over the last few decades, since the 80s at least, has drawn serious questions from the community and eroded our public trust. And so the way you get that back is to give civilians the oversight of the agency to be sure that civilians are receiving the type of police service that they deserve, want, and is constitutional. We haven't done that for about 40 years, and we're trying to fix that.
So empowering people who live here to have a say in the way they're policed is sort of what I'm hearing you say. And obviously that's an incredibly important function. Here in Albuquerque, the citizen police oversight system is frankly a hot mess. The mayor sent you a letter last week, and I would like to go through some of the undisputed facts, the parade of horribles, if you will, that are laid out. Let's start with this. 2 of 5 seats on that board are currently filled. The board hasn't even met since January, let alone discussed any sort of an officer misconduct case, which is its function. The oversight agency doesn't have a permanent leader, and the city council has yet to hire the contractor who is responsible for hiring that permanent leader. Right. Councilor Davis, how can any of that, let alone all of that, be true in a city where the police shoot more people than almost anywhere else in the country?
Well, this gets back to our history of police oversight, civilian police oversight in the city. This is, by the way you count it, the 3rd or 4th time the city council and the mayor have tried to come up with a structure that works. As the president of the city council, I take responsibility for saying that I agree with the big principle that the city council has not been fast enough to move those new pieces along. But we have to remember that the first CPOA, the one that was under the initial version of this after the CASA was implemented, after the Police Oversight Commission, the old version, it really didn't work, right? After 3 or 4 years, there was a rework that Councilor Winter and I worked on to really try to narrow the scope, give them more insight into APD big picture policy and less focus on individual investigations. That got to be ungovernable, and we went through 4 directors basically in a year. And so the city council undertook a year-long process to review that whole thing. We looked at other cities on the recommendation of DOJ, places that worked, places that didn't, and we restructured that last January. So that new CPOA, the Oversight Advisory Board legislation passed. The mayor didn't act on it, and so it went into effect in February. That gave us this past February, and we said it's going to take us a year to do this the right way. And so our staff has been working with APD and DOJ and other communities who've done this a little further ahead of us to look at what that looks like. The new advisory board is not designed to do individual investigations because the idea is individual citizens probably don't have the expertise individually to do that investigation, and so we gave them professional investigators who have experience, training, and this group will provide oversight of those investigators, kind of like the internal affairs department of the police department that sits outside of it, just like the DOJ had done.
So this all lives under the city council, at least in the current iteration. Is this just one of those this takes time things, or have there been individual sort of points of failure or challenges that have come up in the process of trying to get this right?
There is a consistent challenge that we continue to come by. We don't have enough people who have applied to do on this board, and part of that is the history. What we know is that the last iteration of the Police Oversight Board, when they were overseeing investigations and policy and all those things, some of those volunteer members were working 40 hours a week as volunteers just to go to all the meetings and just to read all the policies and keep up with everything, and it was just too much. And so we restructured that, but we said it's going to take a year. And here's what I told the mayor, and here's what we wrote back to the mayor last week. We are on track to do that. We actually appointed 3 members to that board. We were on track to get to a quorum. One of them resigned after determining that they were not going to be able to perform that duty. We've interviewed 11 other candidates have been interviewed and qualified. They're scheduled
for the board.
For the board itself. They're scheduled to be introduced at the city council meeting on the 20th, which allows us to act on them at the first meeting in December. So we're on track to have a quorum of that board ready to go by the end of the year as promised. We have a RFP out for that contract monitor to help us do that. We determined that we needed to know who the board members were going to be and be sure they understood the rules before we had a monitor to sit there and wait. We didn't have anything for them to do until we have a board. So we're on track to appoint that person in December and then hire a director. But it doesn't mean stuff's not happening. We have an acting director, we have investigators, they have been producing reports and data. And so we're seeing those and they're available. But we're at the end of that year of rebuilding. We want to hand the new city council next year a fully functioning board under this new premise and model so that they can be in the oversight role and not in the rebuilding role that I've been in for the last 8 years.
Okay. You alluded a moment ago to the history of attempts at citizen police oversight in the city of Albuquerque. Ostensibly, that began back in the mid-90s. It's never worked. I don't think there's any objective measure that would say we've ever had a system in place that Albuquerque trusted. I think it's worth noting that the framework for the current system was sort of birthed in 2014, and that was sort of alongside the Justice Department's findings of use of excessive force and failed leadership at APD and City Hall. You did sort of grab a piece out of my hippocampus called the Police Oversight Commission. I want to talk a little bit about how that worked. So that was the old system prior to 2014, the POC. Right. The independent review officer investigated the excessive force cases and officer misconduct cases under that scheme. All of that lived under the administration. That's right. One of those investigators, a guy named Jay Rowland, produced an incredibly scathing report about problems in the APD evidence room. Not long after that thing published, Jay was never heard from again. So the task force that created the new system, one thing that was really important to them, and I wrote a lot about this at the time, was making sure that the system was removed from under the administration. They placed it under the council very intentionally. Did they get that part right?
100%. The one thing we know is that in our history in the past is police oversight has been, as you mentioned, and as you wrote about decades ago, has been under the administration. It's given them the ability. And here's what really didn't work. When we go back and look at that old Walker Luna report, right? This is the city council that was Alan Armijo and Sam Bregman did their own mini study about what to do that produced the Police Oversight Commission and then became the CPOA. What they found was that independent review officer, when they report to the mayor, for example, suddenly the mayor who negotiates union contracts negotiated away the ability of the independent review officer to look at some of the more serious allegations or to give the public a long-form view of officer misconduct. And so they had to look at Officer Jeff's single incident and not the 7 things in a row that had led up to that had also been found to be unconstitutional or outside of policy.
No pattern inquiries.
Yeah, that's a great term for that, right? And so what really happened was once the mayor both has control over the police department and the oversight, and this is not the current mayor, it's any mayor, you run into the problem that you mentioned, which is what if they decide I'm not going to allow you to investigate that, or worse, what if I contractually remove your authority to do that with the police union in negotiations, both of which happened in the former model. Every city that's gotten this right or gotten this better than us ensures that they're wholly independent. And that's part of the argument I think the mayor's trying to make about moving them to inspector general. At least in the city, that is a quasi-independent agency with clearly not always a little adversarial with the mayor and the city council. And so if you want a bulldog agency to sort of take on this role, like the inspector general is not a bad one, but there are some flaws there too. But absolutely, independence is important. And don't forget, it's ultimately is the city council's role to hold the administration accountable. That's why we have two branches of government. And so that's part of their role for oversight, is to be sure. If we need an independent group of community people with certain expertise to help us with that, we should implement that. And that's really how we should look at this. It is ultimately the city council responsible, but they're asking for experts to help.
Gotcha. And so that people don't forget that city government has gotten so large now. Yeah. You mentioned holding the administration accountable. APD is the administration is APD. I just want to make sure that that gets said, because sometimes people view that as a separate set of entities.
Well,
right?
And people come to city council meetings asking us to fire this police officer because of what I read in the Albuquerque Journal or a newspaper or on the TV. Remember that city councilors aren't allowed to get involved in personnel decisions. In many cases, we're not even allowed to know what type of discipline was imposed on a city employee in a specific case, other than employees who committed this infraction have had these discipline imposed. And so it really is important that somebody with oversight authority be able to look, as you mentioned, in that long form view, but also in a big picture state. How many people did we shoot last year? What were the circumstances for that? I don't think, as the former police officer myself, and there are a couple of us on the city council, I don't think that we have the expertise to look at all of those cases and do that. But we need somebody who does, and that should inform the city council.
Gotcha. So the mayor wants to take the CPOA piece and place that under the Inspector General, as you just mentioned. He wants to take vetting responsibility for board members on the civilian board and essentially handle that himself. Can he just do that with the stroke of a pen?
Oh, good for the city that he can't just do that. But I think what he's doing is starting a conversation, and here's where I think it makes sense. Remember that we're 95% compliant with where we started with DOJ, according to their own monitors. Meaning we've gotten 95% of the policy right, and we're at about 70, 80%, depending on the section, in terms of implementing it. Meaning that we're doing it the right way, we're recognizing our failures and correcting them. It doesn't mean we have to be 100%. It means we have to correct the problems, and
we have a system in place to self-monitor. Right?
It's a feedback loop, right? When something goes wrong, we fix it and we continue to improve. That's good news. The independent oversight has been a problem in every city that has had these issues, in part because citizens don't all agree on what it means to have a police department that's servicing them in the way they want to see. But ultimately, having the mayor make the decision about who gets to decide whether that's right or wrong, not just to this mayor, but any, is problematic. And we've seen that in other places. We look at what happened with the Oñate statue and the mayor's fight with the museum board, whether their recommendation to remove or return the statue, for example, aligned with their agenda, and they changed out some members of that board at that time. These are some big community conversations, but to your point, we have a history when mayors get to decide who gets to be in charge of oversight and who gets to be in charge of taking action and discipline. Those things eventually sort of meld into one and really can just ignore big problems. And that's how we got here.
So you mentioned the DOJ consent decree. The mayor has been very, very clear that he would like to end federal oversight of our police department as quickly as possible. Yes. He is running for a third term next year. Being able to end the consent decree would obviously look very nice in a campaign ad. From reading the letter that he sent to the council, he's framing this as a way to end the consent decree. Do you view this as political? Have you spoken to the mayor? What do you see as his motivation here?
The mayor and I talk every couple of weeks on purpose in person, and we talked about this before he sent his letter, and I shared it with other councilors, but I think it's sort of dead on arrival for the idea that we would give this to the Inspector General. I'll be done with my term in another couple of weeks, and so it'll ultimately be up to the next council if the mayor can wrangle those votes. But what I know is that the administration and the community, including all the stakeholders in the APD Forward process, worked with us for a year to come up with this new process, to see how this is going to work, to have professional trained investigators, to have an independent monitor in the city council, and to have an advisory board of citizens who can look at the big picture and tell us what's working and what's not. Remember, when this CASA's gone, and I think we should celebrate the fact that we've got, not that they're gone, like I don't like the frame that we're getting really from APOA that says our job is to get them gone. No, our job is to have a constitutional policing agency that doesn't violate people's rights. Mm-hmm. And so when we can prove we do that, we deserve to not have mom and dad looking over our shoulder. But we have to put some of these reform pieces in legislation so that when counselors like me or others are gone, we don't lose that institutional knowledge. That's what this is about. What concerns us is putting the CPOA under the Inspector General or anywhere else where the agenda could get lost. At the very least, we have a group of citizens who can come to the city council meeting and say, we work for you, they're not giving us what we need your attention. When those folks don't report to, when they report to this APD and they all report to the same people, there's nobody to raise that. There's no whistleblower anymore, and that's what got APD in trouble in the first place.
Gotcha. So you mentioned that you think this is dead on arrival with this particular council.
This provision. Anyway.
This provision, right? So what I want to ask, obviously you're leaving the council as you just mentioned in a few weeks, so I'm not going to ask you to prognosticate about what the next council might do, but what is your hope leaving the council for what Burqueños should expect from citizen police oversight going forward? You got about a minute.
Really quickly, what we know now is that it was asking too much to ask individual citizens to volunteer 40 or 50 hours a week to look at individual cases of police misconduct, and their perceptions of that were vastly different, and often they didn't have the experience to apply a constitutional lens that DOJ would apply to the officer were they prosecuted, for example. And so what we've asked is that new board is going to give us big picture stuff. They're going to monitor the provisions of the CASA that we put in law, so when CASA's not here, we still have something to hold them to. They're going to tell us how many officers we have working, how many of them committed use of force used force, and how many of those were constitutional, and how the department is doing. This is the oversight agency. From a professional level, these are the independent investigators are going to be the cops watching the cops, right? They're experienced law enforcement folks applying this standard to be sure that APD systems work. It's the EFIT system. It's the external force review system that DOJ applied to APD when they tried to do their own internal affairs and failed. We're codifying those processes to be sure they're there beyond any of us, and we're going to have that. So what people should expect is more data about how APD reacts and how many uses of force they use on a regular basis, because we have an outside agency and we're not relying on APD to do their own reporting. And they're going to see more investigations and more transparency when APD doesn't close that feedback loop. I think you're going to see fewer and fewer lists of just officer did a bad thing and APD did the right thing. That's not something that generally the public is going to get involved in because that's working. But what you should see is the city council is going to be out of the rebuilding mode and into the compliance mode, and somebody's got to do that. And so keeping that adversarial relationship between the mayor and the council, if everything's working great, they should be focused on other things. But when something falls apart again, it's going to be incumbent on the new city council to raise that flag and use their oversight authority. And I'll be the first to say that the city council hasn't done a good enough job in oversight in other areas over the last few years, particularly on some of the big ticket stuff, and they're going to have to be held accountable to do it now.
That was a long minute. Pat Davis, thank you for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Jeff.